Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Blessings podcast. And today I have a wonderful guest for you. This is Wayne Barbin. Wayne, can you say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself? What should we know about you?
What should you know? Hi, everyone. I am Wayne. I am by trade, I'm a video producer and writer of nonfiction video, primarily health and medicine. I'm in the midst of a career change, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I live in New York. I am single, and I have recently, which I think might make this somewhat interesting, had what we all call a spiritual awakening in the last few years, professional and personal. I'm upending my life on purpose. And that's the super short Cliff Notes version.
How old are you?
I just turned 58 like a week ago.
Oh, happy birthday. That is great. All right. I am very interested in finding out how you became this wonderful man that you are today and what has led you to this place. So let's go back to the very beginning of your life. Can you tell us where you were born and what was happening around that time in your early childhood?
Yeah, so I was born, myself and my four siblings were born in Massachusetts. So we're all New Englanders, small town north of Boston. The thing there that I always tell people is it's New England, and we were raised Catholic. So I consider myself a recovering Catholic. And I'll tell you why that is. Nothing against Catholicism, but I always tell people like it was a pretty normal childhood with me. I'm the middle child of five. My mom didn't work. My dad had one job for 40 years. Very what you would see as Leave It to Beaver-ish. We're still a close family. My father passed away 23 years ago, but where the wrench comes in is, so I'm gay. I started realizing that pretty late, like
Okay.
toward high school, and a little bit maybe feeling something was different, maybe when I was a little younger. So that colored a lot. That distanced me from my parents a little bit, or my dad mainly distanced me from my family later on. It really colored the way that I entered college and how much I worked and devoted myself to my studies. And then later on, and we'll get to this, but it then colored really the way that I handled my career, how much I worked and the way that I worked. And we can get further into that.
Yeah.
But
Well,
really, there
that's
were key
super
inflection moments
interesting.
that were a little tough as a kid.
Okay, let's get into it. So, can you remember going back to when you were maybe a toddler or around before kindergarten-ish, a memory or a story from that time? Like an early memory?
Yeah, that far back, yes. It might have been a little older than that. But so one memory, this is a story I've never told, but it's not huge. But my memory, it was staring out my window of my bedroom that I shared with my two brothers. We didn't have we were solid middle class. We didn't have a lot of money, and realizing that I can still see my friends playing ball in the street, and I couldn't go. I couldn't go out there. I didn't belong. I didn't know why. And I was literally, like whatever, 5, 6, 7, like super young. And that was the beginning of something's off.
Interesting.
And then that goes on to becoming quite a loner
So
later.
when you looked out the window and saw them, did you think of them as your friends? You just described them as your friends.
They were the kids like many of us grew up right in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Looking back, it's a good question. No, now they were called my friends because that was the word. I wouldn't say that. I distanced myself. It's
Okay.
not their fault.
Did they accept you or did you feel like you didn't belong?
As I've analyzed this, because obviously I've analyzed this stuff to death over the years. No, they accepted me. Again, even I didn't know I was gay. I just knew
Yeah.
there was something off. And I got obviously good at hiding it. No, it was definitely me, I believe.
So you isolated yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And so I hunkered down in my room. This isn't an exaggeration. I just can remember I hunkered down in my room a lot for years. Not entirely. I
Yeah.
went out with my family. We went to church every Sunday,
Sure.
but I just have distinct memories of my parents saying, "Wayne, come out of your room."
Okay.
And it was just this lonely, yeah, I don't want to make it too sad, but it was, I just didn't belong. I had to find something where I belonged. So I started reading a lot and stuff you do alone.
Isn't that interesting that we have that intuition as even as a young child?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Something's off. Meanwhile, yet childhood is that joyous period where you don't have any cares.
Yeah.
Like you're the most free spirit that you ever will be in your life. You don't know it. I don't really
And
feel that personally, but yeah,
did you have a time when you were a child that you felt that free spiritedness?
no, no. I listen to a ton of podcasts and personal development and psychology, and I just love that stuff. And I hear this all the time. So intellectually, I completely get it. Pure joy is only when you're a kid, and then society quashes it
Mm,
down. I totally get it intellectually again, but I no,
but
I
it wasn't your experience.
no. And it's okay. It is what it is. I don't, maybe this is the recovering Catholic in me, but I don't blame myself. But if I had the wherewithal to be uncomfortable, try to get uncomfortable, I would have broken out of it, and maybe it would have been a little easier.
Would you have describe yourself as shy?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Is that whole cliche. If you look it up in Webster's,
Your
it's
picture is
there.
there?
Oh yeah. Shy, shy. I broke out. I got a little more social only not until late high school. And then
Wow.
I clammed up again in college.
Okay. So what
So,
kind of a
yeah.
student were you in school? As
So
an
that's the
elementary
thing.
student before high school?
Yeah, and you'll hear this. I think I don't want to never want to stereotype at all, but I've had so many conversations with friends of mine who are gay males.
Mhm.
So I started right away channeling that energy into my studies as
Mm,
long as I can remember. Like I had to come back with an A. My parents, you hear people like, my parents demanded I get good grades, I'd be grounded. It wasn't that. I was like, okay, I got to be the best because I know this is a common psychology thing too, I think if I can just direct their attention to how great a student I am, no one's going to question this, or I can at least hide this flaw at the time, this flaw I have. So I just focused not on sports, not and just be a good student and get
yeah,
all A's. I didn't get all A's. I'm not the smartest person on the planet, but I
but
caught
you
like I
tried.
remember like in eighth grade. Yeah, and in eighth grade, I literally this is something I have literally never told anyone, but it might be the name of my book when I eventually write a book. I remember the moment in eighth grade at the end, last day of the school year, they gave out awards. I won most polite boy. And I remember the blue piece of construction paper that was on that it was on. And I thought this was such a I'm in eighth grade. Like I thought this was a big deal. I look back and I'm like, oh my God. What it now I realize I was such a people pleaser for the same
Yeah.
reason. Hide the crap. The
Most polite boy, most repressed boy.
yes. I like that.
Wow, that's interesting. So, as a little boy, knowing that you felt different, but you didn't understand what it meant to be gay or to be, and I assume, but I don't know, it's a good question, is it didn't manifest itself as like a preference for playing more with the other little boys.
Meaning, was I
Were you
attracted to
feeling
them?
attracted to, yeah, you don't as a child, but it's, I guess it's a
Right.
valid question.
No, it is a valid question. In fact, that's something that I never really think about because it's so the opposite of that. I literally, I remember the first time I noticed a guy and I was like, oh, he's more attractive than his girlfriend. I remember thinking that was freshman year in high school.
Okay.
So back all up until then, I was just like, there's something wrong with me.
That must have been so confusing and so hard to just put a finger on what it was.
It was, and the one of the other things I often think about is I remember, and it saddens me, but a few times driving in the car, it's one of those things you can still picture, driving the car with my father, and at that younger age, before high school, and he would put his hand on my lap and say, "What's going on? Is everything okay?" Like, and I would answer yes. But later in life, and that happened so much, and my mother would do it sometimes, but more my father. And I later in life, I could be making this up. I can't ask him. He's not around anymore. But I think he clearly knew something was wrong. There were other episodes that there was definitely something wrong. And I just was like, no. I think even back then, I was like, this guy has 5 kids. There's 5 of us. What the hell? He has 4 other kids to take care of, which I know, whatever,
Like you
maybe
didn't
not
want to
as
burden
right.
him with your
Right.
problems?
Right. And that
Oh,
carries a little bit more to this day. I know that sounds crazy.
wow.
I've also learned I'm a strong empath, like
Mm,
almost to a fault.
mhm,
And so again, I think it all revolves around hiding something and knowing something was wrong. And okay, why add another like thing to this,
mhm.
whatever else this family has going on,
It's interesting that you thought of it as something being, quote, "wrong,"
I
know?
know, and I hate
Instead of
even
just
using that
thinking,
word.
like, that you were unique or there was something about you that was special or different from the other kids, like, to say that it's wrong in your own little child mind must have been very
And I
hard.
think that, yeah, and I think back then, so that was what? That was, I'm 58, so that was the 70s, and it was wrong or much different than it is today. I was seen as wrong.
Yeah.
And but I do think of that in these days, which is why we'll get to this later, but why I volunteer for the Trevor Project. It's more a matter of being, for the vast majority of the population, seeing it as they're just everyone's an individual, they're different.
Mm,
But you're right, that colored my feeling wrong colored a ton. And
mm.
again, nothing against Catholicism, but I've studied it now, looked back a lot, and it was not necessarily, it made it tougher.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you came through elementary school getting good grades, but feeling like a loner, not really having a lot of interaction, social interaction with other kids. Is that
Yeah.
true? And then when you
Yeah.
got into the middle school time when it's like you're starting to go through puberty and kids are, I don't know, getting crazy. There's drama, there's all kinds of stuff happening in the middle school years. So how was that time for you?
So in short, middle school was, I just hid.
Mhm.
Meaning it was more all studies, no extracurricular activities. That did come in high school, which I can tell you not much, but it was really the same.
Mm.
Uh, the insecurity and all those bad feelings were still there. I remember a couple times being what I would call bullied,
Mm.
nothing like what we would call bullying today at
Okay.
all. But they're also vivid memories by fellow students. But that was keep my head down and study and get great grades. That was all of middle school, except for that most polite boy award. So
Yeah. I love the most polite boy award in a lot of ways because I think it's a great teacher. It's
yeah,
probably been very revealing to think back on that and that you were really hiding
yeah, yeah. It's fast when
and it
when
came
it
out to
dawned
other
on me.
people as being that was seen as positive.
I know, and I now know it's quote unquote negative, and I just think, wow, this could be a great name for the book. Anyway,
That is a great name for the book. I love that. Can you just reflect on the bullying a little bit more?
yeah,
What was it like? Well, give us a story on that.
again, I don't never want to paint a generalized picture, but there was that I hated phys ed. I hated in the locker room, changing in front of the other boys.
Yeah.
I was fearful of going to phys ed. I would dread it. I wouldn't do well. I was the last one picked. I know this sounds so textbook, but it was just true. I mean, there's that whole thing, stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. I remember these are one of those kind of things you again you picture in your you can still say in your mind. I remember standing in front of a good friend of mine. Yeah, he was a good friend of mine. His name was Chris. I remember we were standing in the middle school yard, or maybe it was late grade school, and I remember he was literally a friend of mine, but he started throwing a few words at me that were gay related slurs.
Mm.
And I know this sounds super, I'm embarrassed to say this. It's another story I've never told anyone, but I didn't know what to do. So I turned and ran, literally
Oh.
ran away from him. I mean, which is super, I don't even, whatever, not smart, but it was
Fight
my
or
instinct.
flight kicked in right there.
Oh, that's a
You
good point. Fighter, I never linked it to that. And
literal
and
manifestation
I
of fight or flight response right
That's a
there.
good point. It was literal. I never put it into fight or flight or freeze response. And I just remember hearing him in the back, like, you're a baby. Why are you running away? That's just one. That's not super dramatic. I
Yeah,
hate to even use the word bullying because of how we think of it today, but things
they
shape.
do. Yeah, your trauma doesn't have to be capital T trauma to have impacted you. strongly.
Yeah, such a good point.
And I
Yeah.
think those moments are what cause a lot of people as adults to be troubled and have more, I guess, more severe reactions to things, to act out or to not be able to function well in society because we don't like you're even think it's interesting because you're not giving yourself a lot of grace around that. You're saying, oh, it was no big deal. I don't want to overstate
Mm.
it, but it really was a big deal. That's very sad. That's very hard to go through things like that.
No, it's an interesting observation that you would say that because I hear that a lot today. I hear a lot of people say, why are you so self-deprecating? You apologize for everything. What? And it's just interesting to hear you say that because
Yeah.
it's a tick
Yeah. And he
from
was
that.
calling you a baby. Maybe he was calling you weak in a way. And maybe there was some associations and you thought, okay, maybe that's who I am back then.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but
I didn't not believe that. Yeah.
yeah, that's so interesting. So the other kids may have perceived that you might be gay at that time. And then so
Mm.
how did you feel about that when they said that? Did you
I,
agree with them?
yeah,
Did you not agree with them? Were you still confused?
I have to say, as I've thought about that part of things, so yes, the answer is yes, still confused. I'm no psychologist, but I, as I think about that, I think my own interpretation is I suppressed it so much. I pushed it down so much that it was not allowed, that it was bad because the church said it
Mm.
was, and just as I don't even know what if I knew about society, but church, I didn't know. Like whatever they said, I just had to push it into a box, put it on the shelf, and keep studying. Just keep being a good person
Do you
because I had
remember it
this
coming
black
up in
box.
church? Do you remember them talking about
No,
homosexuality in church?
not as a child, but the Catholic Church doesn't allow same-sex
Yeah.
marriage, as we know today. I just that was more a product, that kind of church part, that religious part is more a product of as I got a little more mature,
Okay.
high school. Yeah.
So you picked up on things maybe just by association.
Yeah. Yeah. And the way the gospel sermons and you
Mm,
surround, yeah.
you can feel it. So then when you got into high school, how did your life change at that point?
High school was a bit of a turning point. I still wasn't admitting it to myself that I was gay, but I was super buried into my studies. Same thing. Somewhere around junior year, yeah, maybe junior year, I started coming out of my shell, just socially, like not as shy. So I got on the yearbook committee. I was in the drama club. I didn't do a ton, but those are the two things that maybe there was one more they're not thinking of. But I found it a victory to at least be social,
Mm.
like somewhat social, and doing something other than studying and
And
in
reading.
classes.
Did you go
And
out with your friends? Did you have a social group where you went to the movies or did things like that?
good question. Actually, not really. I had a few solid friends, mainly still from the neighborhood. I had a girlfriend.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's uncommon either, but I remember Lisa was her name and we kissed. I don't know if that sounds super weird, but I went to the junior prom with a woman named Joanne. I went to the senior prom with a woman named Karen. Like I did these things.
So you dated women.
I guess you would say I dated. Yeah. Particularly this woman named Karen, and I can honestly say because I hate that word, pride myself. It's so important to me to be super honest, like
Mm,
super transparent.
yeah.
And if I knew back then, I would not have done that to Karen. I
Okay.
wouldn't have done that. And so I know for a fact I was still pushing it down.
The relationship with Karen at least was a serious relationship for high school?
Now,
No. Oh, okay.
the several months, maybe during, not maybe, several months during senior year, we literally hung out. Like we never had sex, but like even back then, so what's that? The 70, yeah, late 70s, early 80s. Like I was, even though I was sexually confused, I was like, oh yeah, you don't do this till you're married, period, the end. So yeah.
So again,
So
probably the religious influence, like you had a lot of
oh yeah.
what's
Oh
right
God.
and what's wrong.
And my parents, they were strict.
Yeah.
Like it's not like we talked about sex much. There is this running, like they were great. Thank God, because I was as you can tell, maybe a little bit of a mess, and they were trying to pull things out of me in such a loving way. But still, I often tell people it was New England. This is puritanical New England, and we were Catholic. And so what I tend to tell people is something I heard years ago, which is we were New England, we were Catholic New Englanders. If we had emotion, well, so we didn't have emotions. And if we did have emotions, we certainly didn't talk about them. Like, that's it. You don't
Yeah.
talk about it.
Okay.
And that's how we were. Now, I don't know if all my siblings would totally, they would probably. Yeah.
So loving home, but you don't really talk about things. You just do what you're supposed to do. And
Yeah.
so at that point, did your parents start to realize that something was still off, that you were troubled in some way by things or no?
That's an interesting question too, because by then they weren't really asking what's wrong. Do you
They
want to
stopped
talk about it?
asking.
Because I was less shy. I think they being busy with 5 kids, and I had one sibling that demanded a lot of attention
Okay.
off and on. And so I was more in the background of the family. And by then I had set this course of being a good kid who got
Mm,
good grades. Like, I'm basically low maintenance,
yeah.
is how I look at it. It was really college that I finally was realizing that this whole thing was gay, was being gay.
Wow.
But I commuted, like I didn't live at college.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was a bit of a twisted, like I couldn't run around and sow my oats or whatever people say. Like
Yeah.
it was both. I was realizing I was gay, but I was working 2 jobs to pay for school, the part my parents couldn't afford. But
Mhm.
that's when I was realizing it in college.
Okay. And how do you think the fact that you were the middle child, and whenever I hear somebody who's a middle child of five sibling or five like total, that's like super middle. That's extreme middle child. How do you think that played into your development?
It definitely is here, that birth order thing. And it's somewhat textbook in my case. People, middle children up and tend to say I was neglected. That is definitely not true for me. My parents were great. They spent equal time, other than when we had rocky things with one of my siblings and or something else was going on with a sibling. But no, I think, and to any degree that because I formed this path of, you know what, Wayne's good, he's doing well in school, he's thinking about going to college, he's behaving. It was more like there was nothing to necessarily
Mm,
take care of for me.
yeah.
I think made my own middle child path, meaning even today, maybe less so today because things have changed. But for years, I don't want to say peacemaker, but
Mm,
because we all get along, all my siblings, but definitely the person who brings us together on certain issues if people are differing on things.
yeah.
So not to be too amorphous, but so like for instance, the quick little example, it's off topic, by my mother has Alzheimer's. She's had Alzheimer's for 10 years. We're big, since we're close, we're big on each doing our part for her.
Mm,
So I long ago, 7 years ago, I was like, okay, you guys, we're going to have a monthly Zoom call and you're going to handle this and I'm going to handle this and you're going to handle this. And so things like that, like bringing people together. That's eroded now that we're quite a bit older, but
okay.
I think that's middle child stuff.
Keeping the peace and
Yeah.
but it's interesting that you also took a leadership role in that way. That's very interesting too.
I think I also happen to be power of attorney for my mother in this
Okay.
particular scenario. So it felt a little bit like a responsibility. And I'm super close to my mother,
Mm,
less so now because she can remember our names and stuff. But yeah, I grew up being super close to her.
that's great.
Yeah.
So once you got to college and you started to realize what was going on with you, you acknowledged that you were gay. I wonder if that was a bit freeing. Did it make you feel like, wow, okay, this is who I am?
I would love if that were the case because that is so logical. That's so logical, Mitzi. No, again, I am not. I don't say this. What do you call it? Feeling bad for myself at all. I
Mhm,
just don't have that gene or whatever. But I dug in deeper. So
mhm.
I just remember sitting in the library. I went to Emerson College in Boston, sitting in the library, reading, just starting to look at these books with like about sexuality and with men. I was like, Oh yeah, like I'm attracted to them. Not that it hadn't been percolating a bit, but it glued it. I just remember being in the library. And then it's basically not cut and dry, but that knowledge, so that at least started me knowing it.
Yeah.
But then what I did was I buried myself in my studies. So I went to school for mass communications with a concentration in broadcast journalism. And I buried myself in just my classes, but also I became news director of our radio station.
Mm.
And I was a waiter because, again, I was commuting from home. I was a waiter up near my house. And I was working at the small town radio station there. All of that was a lot. And that I just lived a cycle of work. I didn't do anything. I didn't date. I think I went, no, I didn't actually. It was I was out of college before I went to my first gay bar. So I didn't do anything about it.
Do you think you missed a sense of companionship with a relationship with a person?
I
Did you
do.
long for
I was
that?
just saying this, yeah, to a friend last night. I don't love the word regret, but I certainly regret not living at school. That might have
Mm.
changed my formation, my growth as a gay man or whatever. Freedom, companionship. Yeah, yeah. Now that said, there were a couple inflection points where, because still I wasn't fully admitting it to myself, where I was in a situation, what it's a little hard to say, but a couple situations where I'm still young, older gay men,
Mm.
older, like probably younger than I am now, but
Mhm.
older, made passes at me. I wouldn't call that trauma. I was
Mm.
old enough. And by now I knew something, but that I remember that being like, all right, this is not good. What's that all about? Like some older guy, like I was super naive, but I was not naive enough to know that there was something sexual, like something. And it was just twice and I got out of it. But I just remember that being a thing that colored my view on dating, sex, relationships. Then I got over it years later, but those are just
Wow.
two of those more things that live in your memory.
Yeah. Did it make it feel negative to you that these older men were hitting on you?
I was confused
You were like,
with
were
the
you
first.
confused about what it means to be gay? Does it you were like, "Is this what it means to be gay, that older men are gonna be coming after
Yes,
me?" Okay.
that's exactly what it was. Like, because it was such a new thing,
Yeah.
being gay. What entails being gay?
Yeah.
And I don't want to sound too naive, but I remember the first guy, because that was like early college, late high school, early college. All I was like, wait, this guy is predatory. That's just the
Yeah.
only word, or I don't know if I knew that word, but like that kind of word. So I
Yeah.
was like, this is just not good. And I just remember thinking, wow, I can't tell my parents. I can't tell anyone about this.
Wow.
But then the second guy, who was my insurance agent that I was referred to, we had to go for a drive, and that it was nothing super serious. But by then I knew a little more. And then I was like, there's the most polite boy thing. I was like, how do I get it? We're sitting in a car. Like, how do I get out of this? Like, politely and not hurt him, but not do anything wrong. So it just added a bad shade to it.
That's a thing, the idea of where you are afraid to put up a boundary or to protect yourself in a dangerous situation because you don't wanna hurt the other person's feelings.
And I'm not familiar with that psychology, but it makes sense to me that would
Yep.
be a thing because th- that's what was running through my mind.
It's actually leads to a lot of assaults.
Oh, that makes sense. Ugh.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like you put up, ugh.
'Cause you're afraid of being rude or hurting their feelings.
Yeah. Or getting into danger. Not that this was that kind of thing, but
Yep.
when people who are abused in a domestic situation,
Yeah.
sounds like it's like that, where they
Yeah,
won't leave.
similar.
What's going to happen to me?
It
This
could
was
yeah,
very
could lead to that.
benign, but
Yeah.
yeah, it leaves an impression. Yeah.
So you went through college and then can you tell us a little bit about when did you get to the point where you were comfortable with being gay and wanting to look for companionship?
God, you would think I would know this off the top of my head. So comfortable being gay. Got out of college, started working for this radio station and a couple other television station in Boston. Still worked a lot. Quickly got into a I look back on now and this was a mistake, but knowing what I should do, but knowing what society, not that I thought of it this way, but society does, is I quickly got into a relationship with a guy who was 9 years older than me, not that much older, but I was 25. Anyway, and then within a month, I think I was living with him
Wow.
up in a town near my hometown, still commuting to work. I was at this television station. Nice guy, like, but I think he wasn't fully out. Meanwhile, like we're living in a house, two adult men living in a house in a suburb for 7 years. I think now, and my friends, we laugh, but like, who were we fooling? And we thought people didn't like, I'm like, this is my room and this is his room. What the hell? And
You're just
so,
roommates.
but yeah, exactly. And so I was super not, yeah, I hate to say it, but naive. But I wouldn't say I was in love. No, I was not in love, but I liked him. And that was, now that when you use the word companionship, that's a good word. That is what that felt like. It was
Yeah.
good, solid companionship. And so for that reason, it was good. It's not like it was a huge mistake.
Yeah. It sounds like it was a very nice way to transition into becoming more comfortable with your identity.
I would say that's true because coming out of it, by then, when you ask about when you became comfortable, this never occurred to me, but coming out of it, I think I was comfortable being gay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about the love part? Did you want to be in love with someone?
No. And even today, I don't, I had one other long-term relationship, also 7 years, that ended in 2007. And I often think, no, I wasn't in love with him either. I've never really been in love. I know that can sound a little pathetic or sad, but I've come to work on the fact that nope, that's just my life. And you know what? It could still happen.
What
And I
does love
believe
mean
love
to you?
is,
What is love? Yeah, what is love?
so I didn't want to veer. I'm glad you asked because I didn't know if this is off topic, but I've recently learned,
No.
or I recently believed, because at first I realized, wow, I've never been in love. Isn't that interesting? And I was like, oh, that's sad. And then I went a few years like that, not thinking of it much because I still not whatever. I still like work a lot and all that stuff. But in doing the inner work I've been doing for about 5 years, it hit me that I believe love is a love is a bank. Yes, you have romantic love, you have family love. People always talk about it's different. I'm the love. My love is, I don't know if this is example, it's just the best thing I've come up. I foster dogs until they get
Mhm,
adopted.
mhm.
Started doing it at the beginning of COVID because I was lonely. We were all isolated.
Yeah.
I live alone. And over those years, and I still do it. And at some point along the way, I realized I love this living being. It doesn't
Mhm,
matter that it's a
mhm.
dog. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. And I felt love. And I would occasionally, I've fostered 15 dogs now. I feel not depression. I'm bummed for about 24 hours when the dog gets adopted, knowing that he or she is onto
Oh,
a better place.
yeah.
But that now, I hope this isn't coming up as super insane, but
No.
I feel it as love. That's the
Yes.
most I have felt love, like the love and connection,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the sadness when the animal is gone. And that's now my reference point for love.
I think that's beautiful. I would say for me, in terms of love, the most deep, unconditional love I've ever had has been with my dog. And I've heard a lot of people say that because
Yeah.
you're it's unconditional. It's truly unconditional. Like they will love you no matter what. You're taking care
Yeah.
of them. Even if you didn't take care of them, they would still love you, your dog.
Mhm.
So I think dogs are really, especially as of all animals, really capable of that. I think there's some others, but I think it's interesting that you mentioned that. So do you think it's possible for you to have the same type of feelings then for another human? Do you want that? Do you need it?
Actually, no.
Okay.
And this is also a new revelation too. I hate to be so, no. The last year or two, I feel like whatever percentage of energy your average person, or not average person, someone who's in love or married or has a partner or whatever, puts into, or dating. whatever that amount of energy is that they put into that, I feel like that I want to take that energy and move it into something else, move it into this life mission I'm transitioning into.
Okay.
Now, it recently occurred to me that may be an avoidance tactic.
Yeah.
So I'm also thinking, you know what, maybe I should try dating a little bit to see if I'm making this up in my head. But that's what I believe right now. I know it sounds a little odd, but that's what
No,
I believe right now. I'm meant to devote that energy elsewhere.
I think that's a very interesting point, that you feel called to direct love energy into something more for humanity. Is that kind of what you're
Yeah,
saying?
that's
Okay.
exactly what it is.
As opposed to one on one with another person. I can't help but wonder, do you think there's anything in your life story that has to do with not being able to develop a one on one love relationship?
Yeah, the short answer there is the second relationship I had, I am 100% at fault for ruining it. I was working too much. I was late all the time. I wasn't going to, and he broke up with me. There was some bad stuff, not too bad, but he made some mistakes at the end. But that was me. I take that entirely on my own. And I did that a little bit in that first relationship. So there might be some element of, wow, I'm not sure if I can do a relationship.
Yeah. You repressed it for so long. You kept talking about pushing it down, pushing it down. And then that translated into this, what you call the work. You said you don't like the word workaholic. So excessive work? I
Yeah,
don't
no,
know.
so
What's
the
a better
word
word for it?
I just started using
Oh,
this.
work addiction. Yeah, work
Yes,
addiction.
I just started using that maybe a year
Yeah.
ago because
Yeah.
it's was strong. Like I distanced myself from my family. I don't know if they look at it that way, but I think they would tell you the same thing. Everyone, because I always compare it, you'll understand this. I hope other people will, but like it is like alcohol.
Yeah.
That's how I treated it. And I didn't do anything else. No
Mm.
hobbies, no friend, a couple friends. No, I distanced my friends. That's what I did. And that was up until we're talking 5 to 8 years ago. This is
Okay.
not,
So
you
all
know,
through your 20s, 30s,
and 40s.
you
Yeah.
were heavily influenced by needing to work. You had a very strong drive to work to excess. And you had these two major relationships. When was the end of your last relationship?
2007.
Mm. So you haven't had a relationship with anyone since then.
I was living in DC. That was just before I left DC. I dated someone off and on for a year. And then when I came here to New York, it's several years later after I came to New York, I dated someone for a few months. That's it.
But your focus has been primarily work.
Yeah. And part of that, beyond the whole work addiction thing, is I believed, and I still believe, I and have a good career. So I was, you can be fooled, not fooled. I put out some good video, being a video producer for a living. I put out some good products, like some good shows and series, and I was climbing the ladder from writer to producer to senior producer to executive producer. It all felt very normal.
Do you enjoy it?
I did, and I do, and it's all health and medical. I chose health and medicine way back before I left local. I started in local news because I was like, oh, I don't want to do entertainment
Mhm.
or sports because they're frivolous, like I'm broad brushing. I was like, oh, but if I do health and medical, that's going to help people. Even back then, I was like, okay, I got to help people. My recent revelation, say 5 years ago, was I'm not sure the health and medical stuff I'm doing or have done for the last 10-ish years is sure it helps people, but I'm too removed from the patient.
Mm.
So anyway, there's more to this story in terms of what I'm veering into, but I say this, I don't want it to come out the wrong way. I would not say I'm super successful, but I think I've done a good job. And so that I think fueled my desire and my excuse to work so much.
Yeah. I hear a parallel to when you're talking about yourself as a little boy, when you said you worked really hard at school, but you didn't get the best grades.
Oh, that's
And
a
you
good point.
just kind of said the
Right.
same thing about your adult life. I wonder who you're trying to help
You mean literal through my work?
through your work, that It's interesting to me that your work is focused on helping others. You're thinking about how you can help others with your work and the videos that you're producing and things in the series. But yet you say that it's not really that great. It's kind of basically what you just said. And so you're doing all this work to reach this end, but you're not really getting the end that you're looking for. So I'm wondering, like, what are you really looking for in your work? Or
That's a very,
what are you
I
not letting yourself get?
I think that goes back to self-esteem, low self-esteem that was true a long time ago, that maybe is
Hmm.
still there.
Hmm.
And also winning people over in
Hmm.
some way. And I think, and I don't say this is not a, how do you say, a bragging thing or anything, but of course you would talk to other people and be like, oh no, he's just being modest. He did this, that, and the other thing, these series.
Well, that's what
But
I'm thinking. If I saw one of your videos, I would think it was absolutely fantastic, especially with
it,
all your experience.
I always just tell people I'm just older. So I've just done a lot of video. There were definitely a couple in my head that I'm so proud of.
Oh, great.
But the reason, and hopefully it's a really insightful question, because the reason as I shift my career into other areas, I'm really, in a nutshell, I haven't thought of it this way, but helping people who have been through my similar story, not quite the story we've been talking about, but so in terms of who am I helping, I'm helping myself and these wounds, what I'm talking about, by helping other people with similar wounds.
Yeah.
Not what I intended to do, but now that it sounds a little
But you,
logical.
I 100%, I agree. That's what I
Yeah.
see. And I'm noticing some statues on your bookcase.
Oh,
Won some awards?
yeah, right. So those are there when I do have low self-esteem, but they're tele awards. They're awards for like medical programming. So I was at Discovery for a while. That's why I was in DC. So
Okay.
them's for some programming there and medical programming, and one's for a thing I did for the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria.
Those are some prestigious awards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I look at that, as you might imagine, now that you know me a little bit, I look at that and I'm like, they're not Emmys.
No, but maybe they will be.
Maybe, you never know.
That's really interesting that you talk about that you've been putting that together with wanting to help yourself by helping others. And so I know that now you're talking about having had an awakening. What is an awakening in your
Yeah.
mind?
So this started about 5 years ago. My awakening. So the short version, and we can expand upon any of these that you want, but 2018. So I'm a freelance, I'm an independent producer. So I just go project to project. I've been doing that 11 years. I had a span where I couldn't find another project. It went several
Mm,
months. I went in debt, several tens of thousands in debt. But around the same time, and I don't think this was because of the debt, I think it was because now I'm not working, right? So I'm not directing my focus toward work. I just went into severe depression. I've always had anxiety. I was diagnosed with anxiety many years ago. Generalized anxiety disorder. I don't love the fact that everyone today is throwing around the word anxiety and depression. It's
mhm.
serious, but like there are different types of this. So GAD, depression, it really bubbled up. I basically had this realization like, oh my God, I can't keep batting my head against the wall trying to find work in a panic and desperation every time a job ends. I can't do it. I can't.
Yeah.
I'm tired. So I just had this, not breakdown, but say mini breakdown.
Yeah.
And around that time, I found a different type of job searching service that was more about who you are than resumes and all the typical stuff we think of. And without going into detail on that, is when I started realizing jobs are built on relationships. Hiring is built on relationships. And they taught us how to rely on that, not on just what's on your resume or what
Mhm.
matches the job description. That led to, now that besides, I've always had interest in, say, Tony Robbins types, Deepak
Yeah.
Chopra's stuff, very light. But they interwove some stuff that's more, say, esoteric. I found interest in these things that they interwove that were more, for lack of a better word, spiritual, personal
Hmm.
growth related. And so that then led to, over the course of a couple of years, my what I call my awakening, which is I realized that now, having anxiety and all the stuff we've talked about, I am not my thoughts. That was my,
Mm.
and I think that's true for a lot of people who have an awakening. It's like there's me and there's my thoughts. And I remember I was on the bus on the way from the west side to the east side, going to my job, that my current contract, which is a great contract. And I was listening to Super Soul Sunday, Oprah,
Hmm.
Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah.
Some people might, and he was describing the book he had written a little while back, A New Earth. And I remember it was his description of a certain incident with this woman or her sister that explained it in that way. And that started my awakening. And I just had to dive into that. I was like, that's fascinating. And I've just been going full tilt ever since. I took a
Mm.
meditation course. Right now, I'm learning how to lead a meditation. There's lots there, but that was the beginning of my awakening.
Do you call that your low point in your life?
Yeah, it immediately followed my low point. Immediately meaning, I don't know, a year.
Yeah.
Like there was the low point of depression, anxiety. Like I remember lying on this couch and I was like, wait, I don't do this. I don't lie on the couch. Uh, and I remember a moment, I've been on a couple meds over time, never a lot of meds, but one time where I ran out of one of my meds and it was anti-anxiety
Hmm.
med. I was a mess. I
Yeah.
had a panic attack and I didn't know
Okay.
at the time that's what it was, but
Yeah.
I was like, all right, there is something like, no, that this is, I'm not me. I'm scared. Even that story, I remember it was in an Easter Sunday, I think 2018. My family doesn't know that either. Maybe now they will, but like just these over this course of a few months.
Yeah.
And yeah, the low point into all right, here's my answer, that not just that I'm not my thoughts, but that there is
Hmm.
the ego and there's your consciousness. And I'm
Yeah.
living solely in my ego space.
Yeah, because your whole life from the time you were a child was driven by trying to either suppress or define something external that you weren't able to figure out. And then
Yeah.
you developed your whole identity around work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when that disappeared, it must have led you to somewhat of an existential crisis.
Yeah. That's a great synopsis. Yeah, totally. And it really, without jumping ahead too far, it really informed. I'm between projects now, and it's been a month. I wrapped up a great series. Like it was such a great, my last project was so cool. And you know what? I realized about a week ago, it's been 4 weeks and I'm not anxious and I'm not depressed and I'm calm. I'm not
Mm.
saying there's not moments. I have to pay the freaking rent here,
Yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
other stuff, but I'm okay. Like I'm going to be
Okay.
okay. And if your intent with this new career change I'm making is to help other people who have had some of the challenges we're talking about, the universe, it's going to be all right. I don't want to sound too woo woo, but I believe that.
Yeah.
Whether I'm getting money or not getting money, if I'm doing good for society and people in the way I think I was gifted or I was meant to do, then the money's going to happen.
Yes.
That might be a little naive, especially at my age, but that's what I'm going with. That's my story now.
Yeah. I've seen it happen time and time again. I've seen evidence
Well,
of it.
that's good.
So you're at a turning point. I have so many thoughts about that because I feel like there are many of us who have listened to some of these spiritual gurus like Eckhart Tolle and Deepak. I've been listening to both of them for many years, and we have gone through something extraordinary as a society with the COVID thing. It's changed our relationships with each other
Yeah.
more profoundly than any other incident in our living history. And there are a lot of people who feel like there is this new earth, as we
Mm.
really do have two different earths,
Yeah.
if you will. You get to the point where you have this awakening. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube then. So you
Mm.
need to go into the direction of what you now see as your identity, which is driving your work, which you've always fallen back on, into this new space. So what does it look like for you?
That's so interesting. I thought you were going to say the same thing my therapist said recently. Basically, he was like, "Who's to say that you just because you're doing work that's going to help people, you're going to get work ethics again?" He didn't say that, but like that makes sense. But so
Don't want to say that I'm judging that, because if that
no, no,
is
no, no.
your identity, I don't think there's anything quote wrong with that at all.
Yeah,
You are very much aware that it is a tactic of avoiding something else,
yeah,
but this is who you are and it's where you are, and you should be accepted fully for that and accept yourself fully for that.
yeah.
I'm just wondering, once you really fully embrace this new life, this new aspect of your career, and where it's going to take you as a person, as a human, like how that's going to affect your relationships going forward.
Yeah. So 2 points. The first one, going back to what you had said, because I think about this a lot. COVID was such a huge inflection point for it will be the biggest event in our most of our lives. And I do get a little not frustrated, but even though my awakening was starting before that, that certainly helped crystallize things. And I do wonder about the number of people that had also turned their priorities around. There are a lot, but I think there are also a lot
Oh,
who have short memories and
many.
don't even remember COVID. But for me, it definitely solidified this. And then what it looks like is that's quite a varied answer. Like I'm keeping it, what's the word? For the last month, I've been exploring a lot, looking into various things from coaching to writing to a podcast to speaking. But I feel like it definitely looks like helping a mass of people as opposed to like my therapist was saying, you should become go to school and become a social worker. I was like, no, something about that doesn't feel right. So I think it's helping in the masses. Maybe that's because that's what videos do.
Yeah.
But currently I'm at the point, I don't mean to sound like a cop out, but I'm in a very, it's interesting we're doing this now, a very exploratory phase.
Hmm.
I'm a little nervous to confine myself. Obviously, right now is I'm taking my existing skill set of video and pulling it into the mental health, spirituality, consciousness,
Yeah.
wellness spaces. That's the obvious stepping stone to enter that area. But I'm exploring a lot and seeing what kind of clicks with me and what sticks. I'm
Mhm.
literally reaching out to mental health organizations. I'm reaching out to places like my last client who I did a spirituality show with. So it's hard to say what it looks like, but it says also as far as at one point I was like, maybe I need to take a year off. How I do that, I don't know, but and go become a monk, go on a long meditation retreat, which I've started to do. But
It sounds like you're finally ready to meet yourself.
no, that's good. Oh, that's a good term. Yeah. And yeah.
You really have never done that from what I'm hearing.
No, and you know what's that's so interesting. How I wouldn't have thought about that. You should be my therapist.
I'm telling you, doing this is very powerful.
You're really smart, Mitzi. I mean,
Thank
you
you.
really know. I wish I could be as smart as you. So the
Don't say things like that about yourself.
oh, sorry. There's the self-deprecation.
You need a
But
rubber band on your wrist to snap every time you
that's a
say
good idea.
something.
But to your point, like maybe this is an accurate, what do you call it? Proof of your point. So some of the work I've done that is not work, that is volunteer, what I alluded to earlier is I decided to become a volunteer for the Trevor Project. So they're the largest suicide and crisis intervention hotline or service for LGBTQ plus youth. And I just did that because I was wrapping up my full-time work that I had a couple of years ago. And I knew I had a little time and I trained, and the volunteers are digital crisis counselors. Like we don't take the calls, we do the stuff on text and chat. And I remember I was looking for a suicide and crisis hotline. I wasn't really looking for LGBTQ, but I
Mhm.
found it
Okay.
online when I Googled it. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. I've heard of the Trevor Project. And I'll tell you, without going into details, at one point I was having conversations about 6 months into this. We do 3 hours a week. And I was telling someone about it. And then at the end of the conversation, I was like, you know what? I am as proud of what I just told you as I am of the work I do. The
Mm.
career I do. And I've never talked about anything, but that's my career because I've only had my career.
Mhm.
And I was like,
Mhm.
this must say something.
Yeah.
And so that's always stuck in my head. And
Yeah,
so
it
to your point, meeting yourself, these are kids that they're far worse situations than me, far.
yeah,
And maybe that's a meeting of my, I don't know, something like that, meeting myself.
sounds like it.
But I just want to help. Like I just, that's it.
Of course, by helping others, we do help ourselves. By seeing others, we see ourselves. And so maybe that's what you're doing and why it's important to do it with the LGBTQ plus community for you
Yeah.
because you didn't have that touchstone.
Back then, I don't know if there were any of these. And if there were, I wouldn't have accessed it.
Yeah.
So that's a good point.
Yeah. I also think it's really common. We don't talk about this in terms of men as much as we do for women, but in the 50s, to reflect back and to make major changes in things like career is very common. And I don't know, we talk about midlife. I hate the word midlife crisis. I don't call it that at all. But we think about women making these major shifts, but we talk about men, it's more, oh, they're gonna buy a fancy car or do something like that rather than changing your entire life and redirecting your work and your service to the world.
Yeah.
So I think we should talk about that more in terms of what happens with men too and men's health, because it's definitely something I see. I
Yeah.
see a
No.
lot of guys who come into that age and start thinking about how they can be of service. Of
Yeah.
course,
No.
women too, but
Yeah. I think that's fantastic. Like people do, you hit a certain age and stage in your career where you're like, I want to give back. I want to be of service. But we need more people to do that, especially today, the way society is, and more women. That's interesting about a gender difference there.
yeah, it is interesting. I don't know the statistics on that, but it's interesting to think about that, to contemplate it. What is it that you are getting now that you need that you haven't gotten before in this new phase?
Number one, I would say the chance to the giving my, because it is a choice, giving myself the opportunity to explore, like literally just the courage, I say courage, to jump off the hamster wheel, pull
Mm,
myself out of addiction. But what I'm getting, and this is more a product, although I know these are, I think these are interwoven, that having issues with my sexuality and mental health issues, I have gained so much during this awakening trajectory, which caused me to study mental health because I
mhm.
knew what I was dealing with. What I'm gaining is, say, through meditation and mindfulness, and I do breath work, and I've just started yoga, and I do a lot of nootropics. I'm downgrading the few meds I'm on. I'm downgrading. Like I'm gaining I don't know that I'm at the point of clarity, but I'm gaining a consciousness, a bigger, feels like a bigger, broader, more important knowledge, not in the intellectual sense,
Oh,
wisdom,
yeah.
and the priority that we are here. I just know some of the stuff sounds so cliche, it's
No,
frustrating,
just say
but
it.
we are here to help other people. It's that whole life is not about, it's one of the post-it notes I have up. Life is not about you. Life is about what you're going to give back. You need to be happy and all that good stuff. But so that I think I'm literally learning why I was put here.
Okay.
I think we're all put here for a reason. And
Yeah.
yes, I'm learning late, but that's okay. That was what was meant to be. And it's gifts. Like I went all the way back to my childhood and I was like, what did I like when I was a child? And I really had to
Yeah.
dig. And I made a list of those things. I was like, okay, how does this tie into what I think my gift is in helping with mental health? And there was a thread there. There's a storytelling thread, which is probably
Mhm.
why I entered video. So it's just a route and there's a wisdom and a knowledge. And now I'm gaining maybe it's slow, but some of the pragmatic things that will translate into helping people in the area I think I'm supposed to do.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I'm hoping that you don't sacrifice yourself too much in the process.
I think that's a great observation. And I think there's a danger there. I often tell people that, and I don't often tell people this, I tell my therapist that I don't want this to come off as pathetic, but I'm not a fun person. People say, oh, you're funny, you're interesting, I don't know, you have good energy. I have never been a fun meaning I don't have fun. I don't do fun. Like I don't do it. And that kind of makes sense given my history. But to your point, sacrificing yourself, I know I need more fun.
Yeah.
That's something I have to work on myself. But you're right. You don't want the helping of others to totally eclipse. I don't know.
There's something about, I'm feeling like you are still in that suppression. There's a lack of freedom. You're not letting yourself out. You're not letting yourself go out and play. You're not letting yourself go out and play.
Yeah.
And it is sad in a way, but it's also okay. It brings up the larger questions of, do you need that? Basic human needs. We do need love. We do need relationships. We do need certain things, security, that kind of thing. So it's interesting. I want to talk a little bit about your anxiety. For people who may be experiencing anxiety, where do you think it comes from for you?
Yes, I've thought about this over the years. I believe I've always had it, but I know it came out strong. It came out when I was still when I was still at Discovery, it started coming out. It came out strong when I got laid off. The reason why I came to New York was because I got laid off from Discovery.
Okay.
That's when it started coming out strong. And that kind of makes sense because my work was, I had left that corporate, like I couldn't climb the ladder anymore. And now I'm all over the map. But it really came out strong during my low point.
Okay.
So I think it could be a chicken and egg thing. I don't know if it came out because I suppressed the gay thing so long, or if I was anxious always. And I have it in my family. I have depression in my family. I have addiction in my family. So I don't know which one was first. I want to say it was the whole gay suppression thing.
Yeah.
That brought it out, didn't cause it, but brought it out. Depression and anxiety are so interlaced.
Yeah. Yep.
Same thing. That's what brought that. It was when work started to get looser for me. I was like, oh my God. And it feels terrible. Anxiety, it's hard. It's so hard. So people that suffer a lot, that's why I'm building this toolkit. I have my own toolkit, but I'm building, like, I want to pass this on. What helps me?
What helps you the most?
Meditation.
Yeah.
Oh my God, if I didn't have meditation, I remember hearing when I first took my course right before COVID, that the woman, her name is Emily Fletcher here in New York, someone said to her, meditation changed my life. And I remember thinking back then, I was like, what the hell? I know what or I didn't really. I can tell you now, meditation has changed my life. First thing in the morning, and then not last thing at night, but an hour before bed, which is, you can observe your thoughts, or you're supposed to observe your thoughts. So that's been a big help. And then the one above that, exercise. There is not a morning, and I've always been into fitness and exercise. I'm not Mr. America bodybuilder, whatever that, but the Peloton, like that, we have Pelotons in my gym in the building. I do not miss a morning of cardio because I monitor it. I know how I feel when I do. So those two things, non-negotiable. That's helped a lot.
Yeah, I think both of those things also help you get in touch with your inner self. What do you think about that idea of the inner self?
It's interesting. I get my best creative ideas right after I exercise and right after I meditate. I think that's because of brain chemicals and all
Do you
work.
do an automatic writing practice after you meditate?
I journal. I don't always journal right after. I do my gratitude journal right after meditation. 3 things I'm grateful for that I write down and I just think about for a minute. But the inner self, like, what is that saying? We're all spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes.
Like, that's what matters. Everything else is just whatever. yeah,
An
stuff,
illusion.
an illusion, temporary. It's temporary. It's that Buddhist philosophy truth. And so, yeah, it's all that matters. When I think about how much has changed inside me, yes, it's taking a long time, but I'm amazed. And it's also frustrating. You may have experienced this. Like, I'm constantly telling my family, hey, I'm doing this major life reinvention. I'm changing my life. And they're like, Wayne, like, we're not, what? Like, we're not seeing anything different here. And for me, it's like it's inside. Although I have people say you're much more present.
Yeah.
And I think that, not I think, that's something. That is definitely something, because the work thing, I was never present in anything. I would
Yeah.
fake it,
Yeah.
but I was thinking about, oh my God, I got to get back to work. I got to get back to work.
You're moving from the external to the internal,
Yeah.
which is a major shift.
Yeah. And I just want to teach. That's part of this goal. I want to teach people this. We need, for us personally and the collective and the mess we're in now, people need to know this and how to do it.
Need to learn what they're supposed to be learning. They're not learning their lessons. They're not learning what life has been trying to teach them, and they're traumatized and they're not moving. They're not ascending. They're not
Mm,
growing. And a lot of, there's just a lot of suffering,
yeah.
a lot
Suffering.
of suffering.
Yeah. And suffering is all resistance. And
Mm.
interestingly, in the name of learning that and learning presence and learning what kind of the anti-suffering, ironically. So I was telling you that story about being on the bus and learning, having this spark with Eckhart Tolle talking about his book with Oprah.
Yeah.
So my last project, the production company called me before I started the series I was doing for them to go and do a shoot with Eckhart Tolle. So
Woo!
I was able to go do a shoot with him. We did 25 meditations. It's a series that hasn't been released yet. And I only say that because, so I was like, okay, this is the universe. Like, this is pretty cool.
Definitely. You
Like, I'm on the right
manifested
path.
that.
It was totally like the owner of the production company was supposed to do it, but then his mother passed away. And he knew I was coming on board to do this other series that was also spiritual. And so I was like, oh, you don't even know me, but if you're going to trust me with Eckhart Tolle, go ahead. I didn't tell him that. But
Wow.
I think, and there was this one moment where I was directing the shoot. He had his own producer, and then there was another producer who was going to put it into post and get it edited. And I'll never forget it. We were sitting there, and I was like, oh, I got to tell him to something stupid, move his glass of water. I don't know, before we do the next shoot meditation. And I looked, and I saw that he was just sitting there still in his chair. And I said out loud to these two producers, I said, oh, but he's thinking. I don't want to bother him. And in unison, they both said, they turned to me and said, he's not thinking. And they said, he's in consciousness. He's just being. He's not thinking. And that's where we need to get. And so I say that because it was another lesson in presence, but also people aren't going to learn until they learn to be present and sit and be still for a second and look inside and find their craft.
Yeah. I do think we're meant to learn certain things, and that's why we go through the experiences. And does it seem like the experiences are getting worse? It seems like we're having a lot of bad experiences. There's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of healing that needs to take place. And people are getting to an age where they're from a maturity level able to do that. But for whatever reason, they're not doing it. They're not confronting things. They're avoiding things.
Yeah.
They're not comfortable with themselves. We have constant barrage of negativity and division and all kinds of things that keep us from doing the inner work that we need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so easy to get caught up in that.
Yeah. And then we continue to spiral a little bit further out of control.
And people feed off the bad news and all the stuff that's going on, and people feed off each other
They do.
and whatever
They do.
social
But
media.
there, I think thankfully though, I see so many more people who are wanting to go into the helping fields and becoming more spiritually aligned and more awake to things like this and more interested in consciousness and the exploration of what's really out there or in here or how it's connected, the whole quantum thing.
Y-
There are a lot more people interested in it now. So I feel like there's a lot of hope.
I actually do too, because you hear that. But actually, people like Eckhart Tolle and Michael Beckwith, they talk about that. And I trust them that they're like more and more people are getting into this, or we're
Yeah.
hearing from more and more people care about the collective and they understand, let alone meditation just becoming more mainstream. There is a collective consciousness that's growing. I totally believe that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that is,
I felt like the collective consciousness was getting very strong into the positive before we had COVID. And then it got really
yeah.
squashed in a lot of ways, but I do think it's coming back. I feel like maybe we had to go through that to see the light. We had to go through a dark period to see the light, and maybe the light will come back more strongly than before.
Yeah, I think the world always needs some sort of a correction, and
Yeah,
COVID may have been that
maybe.
correction.
Yeah,
You
maybe.
need something stark. It is, like I said, it's unfortunate to need something stark, but
Yeah,
yeah,
but we needed a big opportunity to learn.
yeah.
We needed a big teacher, a great teacher. And so maybe that's what has been happening with all of the different forms of unrest and dis-ease in the world. What does your success look like to you over the next couple of years with your new ventures?
Having my own business, I mean, I have my LLC now, but having my own business that is entirely messaging driven, platform TBD, meaning there's some video, there's podcasting, there's some speaking, and it meets. And I don't have this fully formed, which is why I'm in this kind of exploratory phase of Venn diagrams. So there's spirituality, consciousness, there's wellness, health and wellness, and then I do a lot of mindset and personal growth stuff. But
Yeah.
in the middle of those things, the Venn diagram is mental health. And that seems to be what I'm drawn to most.
Mm.
And so that messaging business, regardless of platform, needs to help that population. That population, meaning people that are, I can't treat very serious mental illness, but mental health that we all have, so many of us have some degree of trouble with.
Yeah. You
Help
don't
that.
have to be in dire straits to need mental health support. Like, we should think of it as a part of our well-being. Like, we
Yeah.
wash our face, we brush our teeth, we take care of our mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really all I can see. I hate that it's still so amorphous, but
Yeah.
I have to trust, and I know there's that term, trusting the process. I have to, but I'm a big believer in trusting the journey, not getting attached to the outcome.
Yeah, it's unfolding. One of my favorite Martin Luther King Jr. quotes about the staircase: just take the first step in faith.
Mm.
Can't see the whole staircase, just take the first step in faith. And you do have to release from the outcome. It's,
Yeah.
it's hard to do. And
Mhm.
probably for you, it'll be interesting to see because you're used to working on a project through to getting a finished product with your videos.
No, that's
You
so
won't be able to
true.
necessarily see that. Wow. So, what would you say are your biggest lessons that you've learned in life?
Yeah, I would say one is I do this thing that I stole literally from a guy named Tom Bilyeu, who's a motivate. Do you know Tom?
Yep.
Not, I
Yes,
wouldn't
I
call him a
know.
motivational speaker, but
Impact theory. He does
yeah,
personal development work.
yeah, that's a better word. I just, something stuck with me when he said he does something called a deathbed gut check. And so what that is, he'll gauge an everyday thing, whether it's a project or something he's doing or something he's getting obsessed about or anxious about. And he'll just sit back and think, is this going to matter on my deathbed? And then
Mhm.
that releases him and it puts things in perspective. For me, it alleviates my anxiety because I can get like laser focused and get super wrapped up in something. But I've learned now to pull myself back and do a quick deathbed gut check and be like, no, not that important. I would say another big one is something I mentioned earlier, which is life is not about you. Again, you need to be happy and successful, whatever that means for you. But part of your happiness is contribution. Part of a big prong of what you're giving back or of your life is contribution. And maybe the third big one. There's several, but this is a good one. And I'm trying to think of one that relates to your good point about helping myself by helping others and
Yeah.
still having some suppression. I think it was Henry Ford. I forget, but I heard that quote a while back about what really matters is, do you like yourself when you're by yourself?
Mm.
Like when no one is there to see the video you produced, or no one's there. No, you're lying on your pillow at night. Do you like yourself?
Yeah.
Is big. Are
It's
you meeting what
huge.
you need to meet? Yeah, those are, again, I have a million. I tend to be a big post-it guy. So I have a million post-its with these kinds of things on them.
I love
Um,
that.
but those are three that really,
That stick out.
yeah, that have sunk in
They
over time.
stick out, your Post-its.
Right, there you go.
What do you still have to learn, do you think?
I think I have a new thing to learn after doing this. I think I do. I've known I need to learn taking care of. I'm so good at I eat right and I exercise, but taking care of I don't know what the word is, making sure I get out of this life to the same degree that I want to give others out of this.
Yeah.
That's a,
Self-fulfillment. I like what you say about the idea of we're a part of the collective. And we're a part of the collective because we're all, in my opinion, fractalized from one source.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so we are one another in that sense. And so I do feel it's important to develop the self in a non-selfish way, or in selfish but not in a bad way, because then we can affect the collective. Like we can't possibly affect the collective positively if we're not at a certain place with ourselves. It's
yeah,
like they say, you can't truly love someone else until you love yourself.
yeah, absolutely.
Do you think you love
Absolutely.
yourself, Wayne?
I was just going to say that could be the core of me saying I haven't been in love.
I know.
No, actually, I would say that in all honesty, it's, again, I don't mean it to sound dramatic, but no, I'm not sure if I'd say I'm at the point of loving myself. But I think part of this work is getting there.
Do you want to love yourself?
Yes. Yep.
Is there some fear?
Fear.
You spent a
Interesting.
lot of time not being yourself, not being who you knew you were because you thought it was wrong. You
Yeah,
thought somehow
it's
who you are is wrong.
totally. And I would say that that's a good question, the fear question. I would say there is fear because I think that goes back, or is a deathbed gut check. I don't
Mm,
want to be in my deathbed, because I will be if it were tomorrow, being like, okay, I meant to help people. I was trying to do good, but I screwed myself, or I cheated myself. Yeah. Yeah, I do. And it's only going to benefit other people, like you said, like we all
yeah,
know,
because
other
people
people
won't.
more.
It will, and people will feel that. People will know that if you had a doctor, if you had to have brain surgery, I want my brain surgeon to think that he's the best or she is the best brain surgeon in the
Mhm.
face of the earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want them to have full confidence in their abilities to do my brain surgery. So it's the same thing when you're helping others, like just continuing to raise your vibration and get in the state of feeling like illuminated with whatever the qualities you want to imbue through your work are, like to
Yeah.
embody that so that you can give it to someone else.
That's a good word, to embody it. Meaning I can intellectualize it, but
Yep.
that does no good. If
No.
it's when you work it in,
Yep.
you're right. Embodying is giving the energy, not just the information. So that, yeah, that's such a good point.
It's a holistic being, sense of being, like what Eckhart would totally would do, to just be, but to totally be in the thing that you want to give is very
Yep. Yep.
interesting. I love it. And so what about your blessings? What do you count as your biggest points of gratitude in life?
The first thing that comes to mind is my nephews and nieces, because I don't have kids. I'm super close to all of them, but several of the younger ones, or all of the younger ones, And interestingly, as a side note, one ironically happens to have anxiety, severe anxiety and depression right now that are just coming to the
Oh,
fore. His dad, my brother, just pulled him out of college last week. I'm
oh,
flying there Sunday to have,
oh,
and so that to say, when Chris asked me to go, I'm so grateful for that. I can do whatever I can do, and that we've been close so that I could even be of some service. So that's a big one. That's a big blessing. It doesn't get lost on me that at this age, or maybe not even an age thing, I have the freedom. Now I'm making this freedom to upend my life. Like a
mm,
lot of people can't do that
yeah,
income wise or whatever. They have kids and just things or diseases, and I can do that. So that's a big blessing. Like I am
yeah,
super fortunate. And that's why I want to give that fortunate back.
yeah.
And, and I'd have to say, I know that maybe a lot of people say this, but, and it dovetails with what the first one, but my family, like, I think I've always been a good brother, son, all that. But they have put up with the fact that, again, I went through those years of distancing.
Yeah.
And I think that we are, as much as we're all super different, we're super close. And when my
Mhm.
mother does pass, she's pretty old. And again, the Alzheimer's has been 10 years. And I'm working on this. That can often divide a family when there's no more parents left,
Yeah.
making sure that doesn't happen. So,
Yeah.
yeah, gratitude for my family.
It sounds like your family's been very supportive in a lot of ways. I know you mentioned you had some tension with your dad when your conversations about your being gay came out, but your siblings seem to be very supportive and loving.
Yeah, they were great when I came out, and a couple minor bumps, but super great. And the brother I'm closest to, the sibling I'm closest to, is has been amazing,
Mhm.
like amazing. And I think
Yeah.
he is a big reason I'm so close to my nephews and nieces.
Yeah. That's
And I
wonderful.
think an uncle should do that. Someone who's single, doesn't have kids. I think you not should, I don't use the word should, but I want to be the crazy uncle or the
Yeah.
the uncle that's the fun guy who can fly out there at a moment's notice.
You just described yourself as fun.
Oh, you're right. Maybe I should talk to my nephews and nieces.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that. Oh my gosh. All right. My big question I like to ask people is what do you think is the most important thing?
Oh, period.
Yep.
The
Period.
just the most important.
The
Wow,
most important thing.
the most important thing: leaving a dent in the universe.
Mm,
Yeah, I think I'd have to leave it at that. Leaving a dent in the universe when you are physically, your physical vessel is gone,
mm, I
and
like that.
hopefully that's yeah.
I'm gonna think about that. That's a good one. Wow. Thank you so much, Wayne, for being so open-hearted and vulnerable with us. Your life story is so interesting and so relatable, and I love the work that you're doing going forward with this crisis hotline and the work that you're going to do as you're letting that unfold with mental health and using your experiences to help others is so impactful. So, thank you for everything you're doing, and thank you for being here with
Thanks.
us.
Thanks for listening and thank you for having me. And yeah, as long as it does good, that's again for all of us, that's all that matters. So thanks for being so open and listening and being so insightful. You're really good, Mitzi.
Thank you. Oh my gosh.
This
Thank you.
is why you do what you do. So
Yes. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, thank you, Wayne.
thank you again, Mitzi.